Have you ever wondered what actually happens when older adults stop touching themselves? Not in a vulgar way, but in the simplest, most private act of connection? Most people don't realize that the moment you stop engaging with your own body, something much deeper begins to shift. And no, it's not just about desire. It goes far beyond that. My name is Dr. Edward. For over 30 years, I've worked with thousands of older adults, men and women alike, helping them restore their energy, strengthen their bodies, and maintain mental clarity and resilience at every stage of later life. Today, I want to talk about a topic that many are too embarrassed to ask about, yet quietly suffer from in silence. In this video, I'm going to walk you through 3 things that happen to your body and your mind when you stop masturbating after 60. First, we'll explore a shocking connection between self-intimacy and physical pain that most seniors don't see coming. Then, we'll dig into a quiet emotional shift that sneaks in when you lose touch with your own pleasure. And finally, I'll reveal the truth about how this seemingly small habit could be the missing link to better sleep, stronger immunity, and even a healthier heart. Most people think they've left this part of life behind. But what if leaving it behind is what's been holding you back? Before we begin, let me ask you this. Have you ever felt like you were slowly becoming invisible? Not just to others, but to yourself? Like your body still walks and breathes, but your sense of connection to it is fading? Hold that question in your heart, because what we're about to uncover might explain why. Let me start by taking you back to a conversation I had with a 73-year-old patient of mine named Harold. Harold had been widowed for nearly a decade. He told me he hadn't touched himself in over 5 years. It just didn't feel right anymore. He said, "I thought maybe I'd grown out of it." But Harold had been dealing with chronic pelvic discomfort, irregular sleep, and low mood for years. We tried the usual treatments, diet, exercise, even physical therapy. Nothing helped. Then one day, we talked about intimacy, not with someone else, with himself, and that changed everything. See, what Harold didn't know was that the body responds to what it no longer receives, just like muscles shrink without movement. Your sexual organs and the entire pelvic area react to lack of stimulation. When self-touch disappears, circulation drops, sensitivity dulls. For men, the risk of prostate congestion increases. For women, vaginal dryness and irritation become more common. And the discomfort? It isn't in their heads. It's biological. Within a few months of reintroducing regular self-intimacy, just once or twice a week, Harold noticed his symptoms ease. His mood lifted, the tension in his lower body softened, his sleep deepened, and, more than anything, he felt like himself again. Not younger, not lustful, just alive, present, now. You might be thinking, okay, that's physical, but I'm fine emotionally. Are you? Let me tell you about Eleanor, a retired teacher in her late 60s who said to me during a session, "I feel like my body's no longer mine." She wasn't in pain, she wasn't sick, but she had this constant sense of disconnection, like she was watching her life from behind glass. We talked about touch, not from a partner, not even from a massage, but her own hands, her own time, her own tenderness. She began a practice of mindful self-touch, not even masturbation at first. Just intentional moments of reconnecting with her body, brushing her hair slowly, moisturizing her arms while breathing deeply, holding her belly with care, and eventually, when she was ready, exploring pleasure again. The result? That sense of distance began to dissolve. She smiled more. She stood taller. Her posture changed. Her voice changed. She felt real again. Here's the truth most seniors don't hear. When you stop touching yourself, you risk more than just physical decline. You begin to forget what it feels like to belong to your own body. You start to live like a caretaker of an aging machine, rather than the inhabitant of a vibrant, responsive, sacred space. But we haven't even touched on the deepest layer yet, and that is what happens inside the brain. Stay with me, because this is where it gets fascinating. Most people know that orgasm releases hormones, but they don't realize how critical those hormones are in older age. Oxytocin, dopamine, prolactin. These aren't just feel-good chemicals. They help regulate sleep, improve memory, ease chronic pain, lower stress, and even boost immune function. Think of it like this. Every time you engage in self-intimacy, your brain gets a chemical tune-up, not artificial, not medicated, completely natural. Yet when this practice vanishes, the brain goes quiet in ways we don't immediately notice. Over time, that quiet becomes numbness, then sadness, then fog. That's not aging. That's chemistry. So if you're someone who thought this chapter was closed, I'm here to gently invite you to reconsider, not out of shame, not out of pressure, but out of the deepest kind of care for your own body, your emotions, your spirit. In the next part, I'll share with you how this simple act doesn't just help with sleep or stress. It could actually reduce your risk of major health complications that many seniors face silently. You don't want to miss that. Let's go a little deeper now, into a place that many of us are hesitant to explore. Because while emotional connection and brain chemistry are essential, there's another part of the body that quietly suffers when we cut off this form of self-care: the prostate. You see, I've worked with hundreds of older men who started experiencing frequent urination at night, pelvic pressure, or even mild incontinence. The usual tests would often come back normal, or only slightly off. But there was one common thread among many of them: a complete stop in sexual activity, including masturbation. Now, let's be clear. This isn't about sex for sex's sake. This is about biology. The prostate is a small gland. Yes, but it plays an outsized role in the male body, regulating seminal fluid, supporting urinary flow, and acting as part of the hormonal and nervous system dance that keeps the pelvic region healthy. When this area becomes inactive, the gland can begin to stagnate. I remember Frank, 69, a retired engineer, who had been waking up 4 times a night just to urinate. He felt frustrated, embarrassed, and tired. No amount of sleep hygiene worked. No medications helped for long. When I asked about his sexual activity, he just laughed awkwardly. "That ship has sailed," he said, but I asked him to try something different. Reconnect with his body, not with pressure or performance, but with consistency. Within weeks, his nightly bathroom visits decreased, his energy stabilized, and more than that, his confidence returned. You could see it in his walk, his eyes, his voice, because it wasn't just about physical relief. It was about reclaiming something that quietly, invisibly held power over his daily life. This is the part many doctors don't talk about, not because they don't know, but because they assume older adults won't ask. But you should, because this is your health. This is your autonomy. And the choice to engage in this kind of preventative care is yours, not society's, not your upbringing's, yours. And while we're here, I want to share one more story with you about Nora, 74, who had lost her husband 5 years earlier. She was fiercely independent, traveled alone, even took yoga classes. But in one visit, she said something that stayed with me. "I don't think I've really touched my own skin in years." That hit me, because it wasn't about sexuality, it was about presence, about touch, about recognizing your own physical being as worthy of kindness. Nora had replaced her soft self-care rituals with schedules, checklists, and routines. But somewhere in the middle of all that, she lost contact with the person inside it all. When she started reconnecting, moisturizing slowly, massaging her legs, practicing slow breathing while lying in bed, something changed. Her smile became gentler. Her anxiety softened. She stopped rushing through everything. And eventually, she rediscovered pleasure in ways that surprised her. Because here's the truth: touch is medicine. Whether it comes from another or from your own hands, it tells your nervous system you are safe. It tells your heart you are seen, and it tells your soul you are still here. Now, if you've stayed with me this far, I want to offer you something practical. In the next part, We'll walk through how to safely, respectfully, and comfortably reintroduce self-intimacy into your life, even if it's been years. And if you think this isn't for you, well, that may be exactly why you need to hear it. Because it's not about age, it's about ownership. It's not about lust, it's about love. And it's not about the past. It's about finally coming home to yourself. So let's talk about how, not the clinical how, not the textbook how, but the human how. The gentle, quiet, private steps you can take to reconnect with your own body in a way that feels natural, respectful, and right for where you are now in life. The first thing I always tell my patients, especially those who haven't touched themselves in years, is this: drop the goal. This is not about climax. This is not about proving anything. This is about presence. If the only thing you do is lie down, take a deep breath, and place your hands softly on your own belly, that alone can be enough to begin. Think of it like rebuilding a relationship with someone you've known your whole life, but maybe haven't listened to lately. Your body is still here. It's still waiting, but it wants to be approached with patience, with kindness, with the understanding that age hasn't broken it. It's just asking to be met in a different way. I often recommend starting with a simple evening ritual. Light a candle, sit or lie somewhere quiet, turn off distractions, take 5 minutes just to breathe, to feel where your body's holding tension. Then, apply lotion or oil to your arms, your legs, your chest, slowly, intentionally, not as a chore, but as an offering. If that feels safe, you can move toward more intimate areas. Again, not to chase pleasure, but to awaken connection. Touch lightly, be curious. Notice what feels good, not just physically, but emotionally. You might be surprised at what you discover. Maybe a sense of grief you've held in your shoulders, maybe a memory stored in your hips, maybe, finally, a sense of peace in your own skin. For men, this often means letting go of performance. There is no timeline. There is no need to finish. In fact, many find that by removing that pressure, they enjoy a deeper, fuller sense of connection than they ever had in their youth. For women, it often means reclaiming parts of the body that were ignored, judged, or only touched in the context of someone else's pleasure. This is your chance to take back the narrative, to ask yourself what feels nourishing, what feels comforting, what feels like home. And no, this doesn't have to be a daily habit. For some, once a week is enough. For others, it's more often. But the point is not frequency, it's consistency, not intensity, but intention. And I want to say this directly to those of you who feel shame creeping in. That shame is not yours. It was given to you, maybe by a parent, maybe by a preacher, maybe by a society that treated aging bodies as invisible and aging pleasure as inappropriate. But you have permission to give it back. What replaces that shame isn't something wild or reckless. It's something deeply human, a softening, a rootedness, a sense of, I belong to me. And once you begin this practice, whatever it looks like for you, you may notice unexpected changes. Your sleep might deepen, your mood might lift, your anxiety might lessen. You might even start craving healthier food, moving your body more, calling people you haven't spoken to in years, because connection breeds connection, and all of that from a quiet, private ritual that no one else has to know about. That's the beauty. It's just for you. In our final part, I'll walk you through the long-term risks of avoiding this kind of care and what happens not just to the body, but to the spirit when we forget that we're still allowed to feel. If you've ever felt disconnected, numb, or just unsure of who you are in this new chapter of life, what we'll talk about next may offer you the clarity and comfort you've been quietly hoping to find. Let's finish this conversation where it truly matters most, not in the physical or even emotional layers, but in the quiet space of spirit and self-worth. Because what happens when you go years, even decades, without touching your own body with kindness? What happens when you silently accept that some parts of you no longer deserve attention? I'll tell you what I've seen, Not from textbooks, but from real people who sit across from me. Hands folded, eyes tired. I've seen the slow fade of joy, the quiet erosion of confidence, the way people shrink into themselves, not just from age, but from a loss of internal connection. And I've also seen the opposite, the spark that returns when someone finally gives themselves permission to feel again, to reclaim. See, the body doesn't shut down all at once. It closes in layers. First the playfulness, then the curiosity, then the desire, then, eventually, the belief that you are even allowed to want. That's the true risk of ignoring this part of yourself. It's not just about the prostate or hormone levels. It's about the slow, almost invisible surrender of aliveness. But it doesn't have to be that way. One of the most powerful things an older adult can do is say, no more hiding, no more pretending this body is just a vehicle for medication and appointments. This body is mine. It's been mine since the beginning, and it still wants to be honored. When you start showing up for yourself in this way, you don't just touch skin, you awaken memory, muscle, identity. You tell yourself, I still count, I still matter, I still belong. And that message ripples out into how you talk to others, into how you move through the world, into how you dream. Even now, because you are not a leftover, you are not an afterthought. You are a whole, breathing, feeling person with a lifetime of wisdom and a body that still listens, still responds, still hopes to be held. So what happens if you continue to ignore it? If you let this part of you remain in silence? The answer is simple. The silence gets louder. It echoes into your mood, your relationships, your health, your sense of self. But the good news, you can change that starting today. Not with a big decision, but with a small one. One hand, one breath. One moment of attention that says, I'm here, and I'm not giving up on me. If no one else has told you this before, let me be the first. You do not need permission to be close to yourself. You do not need to explain your desires or justify your rituals. You are allowed to feel good. You are allowed to want comfort. You are allowed to be seen, even by your own eyes. So as we close this chapter, know that this is not an ending. This is an invitation to come back, to slow down, to rediscover. Because your body is still waiting, and every time you choose to meet it, not with shame, but with care, you're choosing a life that isn't just longer, but deeper. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. And thank you, above all, for being willing to feel again. I'll see you in the next video, where we'll talk about the surprising link between self-touch and longevity, and how simple rituals like the ones we've discussed today may actually predict how long and how well you live. Until then, be gentle with yourself. You deserve it.